All right, let's talk prospects. Every sport has rookies, but I feel like baseball is the only one where we can use the term prospect for a player that hasn't played. We don't even know if he's going to play in the majors and then can immediately make an impact that same season. And that's kind of what makes prospecting fun because you never quite know what you're going to get. But I think that these are the prospects that you need to be aware of in fantasy baseball right now. So let's run through the top 25 prospects for redraft leagues, meaning these are the rookies that can help you in 2025 as soon as they get the call. Now, for me, the number one pick is pretty obvious. If you've watched all of my videos this offseason, well, then you're probably my mom. Hi, mom. Love you. But even so, if you caught the one where I talked about Jason Dominguez being really overlooked and undervalued, I feel like, by the fantasy community, even the experts, you know how strongly I feel about him. And I'm not even viewing him just as a prospect. I just mean this guy could be a monster right here, right now. He still has prospect status. He's got the highest ceiling by far. A little bit of the luster has gone off of, when we think about him as an 18-year-old and we thought that he'd be the next Babe Ruth. Okay, those were a little bit ridiculous expectations, but he has power, he has speed, he has the hit tool, and he might be batting leadoff for the Yankees on opening day. What more could you ask for? Yeah, he's my top prospect, and I'm drafting him as early and as often as I can. Number two is going to go to Dylan Cruz in Washington, the player we saw briefly at the end of last year. We weren't sure whether James Wood or Dylan Cruz were going to get called up first, maybe simultaneously. James Wood did get the call midseason. We were all hyped up about him, and man, he's being drafted very high, very aggressively this season. You don't need to worry about that with Cruz. He's being drafted much later, but he still has that power and speed and hit tool. A little bit different than Wood. Wood has a lot more raw power. Cruz maybe isn't quite there in terms of the game power yet, but he stole more bases than we expected. Washington runs more than any team. In fact, last year they led the league in stolen base attempts per game. And so that's going to help Cruz in terms of fantasy value. And I think that the average will be much better than it was last year. Not only should he have an everyday job from opening day, but he's slotted right now, predicted to hit second in that lineup after CJ Abrams and before James Wood, which is a pretty good spot. At number three is the pitcher I'm most looking forward to. It's Jackson Jobe of the Tigers. As if his stuff wasn't filthy enough, he's adding this preseason 2 pitches to his mix. That's going to give him a 6 pitch mix to confuse batters with after he gets that curveball going and a 2-seamer, which is being labeled a sinker just to induce more ground balls. He's going to get all sorts of batters out in all sorts of ways. I mean, this guy could be a legit star from the jump. All right, we waited too long. Number four is another guy I dedicated an entire video to much earlier this offseason, Matt Shaw for the Cubs. Shaw can do it all, gives you a little bit of power and speed, should have a pretty decent spot in that Cubs lineup. Now, there was some question a little bit earlier in terms of would he definitely have that starting job? Of course, he, like any player, has to earn it. But also, I'm not worried about Justin Turner, who they just signed. You really think they got him to be the everyday third baseman? I don't think he's going to be the everyday anything, much less at the hot corner. He's going to play maybe a little bit of first base and just some DHing and really be a bat off the bench. I'm not concerned about that. And that oblique injury that Shaw had suffered earlier, it's fine now. It seems like he'll be all set to go for opening day. Now, number five, here's an interesting one. Where's Roki Sasaki? Well, here he is. Now, this isn't too low, but you almost might wonder if you did see my bust video, how can he be this high when I called him a draft bust? So as I explained in that video, bust, that term is relative to where they're being drafted. It's all about cost, right? And that risk potential. And this is a very risky pick, but at the same time, he is still legitimately one of the best prospects in the game, if you want to call him that. Look, my concerns are his injury history, very recent, right? The elbow, we just don't know if it's going to hold up. Of course, the Dodgers just happen to have a very recent history also of every single pitcher in their staff getting hurt. But also, realistically, they're going to go to a 6-man rotation. They have this monstrous bullpen that just invested a bunch of money in, like everything else. What is his innings limit going to be this year? They're going to want to keep him fresh for the playoffs, so I just wonder how much he'll contribute. And that's why I worry about drafting him so early. But at the same time, if he puts together like 120 innings, something like that, he could still be helpful and he could actually be very productive for fantasy teams just in a limited capacity. So I don't want to draft him early, not in the top 100, but I still think he might be one of the best pitching prospects in fantasy. But right behind him, we'll go with a pitcher I talked about in the breakout video from earlier, Bubba Chandler. Pirates fans could get used to seeing these pitching prospects come up and dominate in the majors. Happened last year with Jared Jones and then Paul Skeens. Now, Chandler may fall somewhere in the middle. Of course, we don't expect the next Paul Skeens, and we definitely shouldn't, but he could definitely be as productive as Jared Jones was early in the season. But that's the question. When will he get the call? Will it be as early as Jones? Will it be later like Skeens? We don't know. And so that's why I can't rightfully put him ahead of Sasaki, because even with those concerns as far as innings pitched and potential injury, I don't know that I can confidently say Chandler is going to be out there more of the season. But man, he's going to be ready when he does. Last year, 183 ERA in his 7 starts at the AAA level and a really high strikeout rate. This guy has the stuff. Same thing for my next pick, Kumar Rocker of the Rangers. I'm all over him. Is he going to be in the rotation opening day? I don't know. In fact, right now I'd have to lean probably not, but how long is that going to last? So we'll see Rocker. Probably dominate at the AAA level for a little while longer. But man, this is a guy who has a filthy slider, a great fastball. And as soon as he does come up, he's going to be a mainstay in the Rangers rotation, and it should be for fantasy as well. Now, number 8. Another Dodger. Yeah, they don't just get all the free agents, they still have good prospects as well. Dalton Rushing, who is a catcher by trade, but here's an interesting note is that they've been having him work. Not only does he have experience in the outfield, but also at first base a little bit during the spring. So this is a player that might gain multi-position eligibility, which is always useful, but especially if it's a guy who can play somewhere else and still retain catcher eligibility. So they've got Will Smith, and that's the big question is where do they put him? They're pretty stacked everywhere. So don't know how long they can keep him down though, because Rushing was raking in the minors. He is ready for the majors. We'll just see when that happens. Now, a couple of players I know will be on opening day rosters. Jacob Wilson for the whatever they are, A's. Wilson is looking like he might be the next Luis Ariz. This is a player who hit 433 across multiple levels last year, most of it at the AAA level. He can hit, right? The only thing is that comes at a cost. Of course, you hit for average and such a high contact rate, you're not getting that massive power. And he really has very little power so far to speak of, and you're not getting a lot of steals here either. So while it might feel like potentially a shallow fancy profile, it is worth noting that he's coming in this offseason stronger, bulked up a little bit. In fact, added 15 pounds of muscle, supposedly. Doesn't mean I expect 20 homers out of him, and I don't expect the A's to be very good, but at the same time, batting average is really more valuable these days than home runs in fantasy. So this is definitely a player that should be considered in most redraft leagues. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Colson Montgomery for the White Sox. More of a slugging shortstop, much bigger already. His frame at 6'3 and 215, and he also could be the starting shortstop on opening day. But you're going to get something very different than with Wilson. You're going to get power. The average might be questionable. In fact, last year at AAA, he went deep 18 times, but only hit for a 214 average across 485 at bats. Now, that was a step down. He had hit for average previously. You wonder if he's trading off some average and sacrificing contact for power. He'll figure it out, and he'll have a very long leash to do it because he's on the White Sox. So that playing time, though, the fact that he's guaranteed the opportunity, again, I'm not guaranteeing he's going to be the starter opening day. We don't know that yet, but there's a good chance he gets a lot of at-bats this season. And because playing time has to matter for fantasy purposes, that's why all the way down at number 11, I got Roman Anthony, who for a lot of outlets is the number 1 prospect in all of baseball. MLB Pipeline and Baseball America have him number 2 overall. Baseball Prospectus has him number 1. Either way, look, this guy is also ready to contribute. It's just a matter of when. And, the Red Sox are now a very interesting roster. If you look at it, they almost have a logjam at a lot of these offensive positions. You got to wonder what's going to give. And are they going to keep guys like Anthony and Christian Campbell, who I'm about to get to, toiling in the minors for half the season? It's legitimately possible. He's still very young. It's not like he has to break through the door right here, right now. So that's my concern with Anthony. I wouldn't draft him in a redraft league much more than with a very, very late, if not last round pick. But more than likely, whenever the time comes that he is ready to get the call midseason, he's probably going to be the number one waiver wire pickup, at least for that week, if not for the entire season. So let's follow that up with Christian Campbell. Same exact situation. Second base looked like it had a pretty clear path for Campbell, except things have changed, and it's not about whether Von Grissom will finally show up this year or David Hamilton looked decent last year. And all of a sudden, they signed Alex Bregman, and Rafael Devers is pretty adamant about not moving off of third base. So now Bregman is penciled in as a starting second baseman. So where does that leave the rookie with Campbell? It probably leaves him at AAA for now, not as if he has anything else to prove. I mean, he moved up so quickly through the minors last year. In 517 plate appearances across multiple levels, he hit 333. He grades out at 60 for both power and speed. He can do it all, but when will that happen? So at 13, I have another second baseman who I feel will be on the roster, if not starting at second base opening day, Christian Moore for the Angels. Only had 101 at-bats in the minors last year, but during that time he hit 347 with 6 homers and 20 RBIs. This is more of a power first bat, definitely an offensive-minded player at the Keystone. Came from a pretty successful college program at Tennessee, so he has that readiness, and he definitely has the opportunity with the Angels, who are glad to have a talent like him finally in a farm system that really should be a lot better than it is. And a farm system that's probably too good for its own good is the Orioles. What is going to happen with Kobe Mayo? Again, this is a player that in almost any other franchise would already be at least on the roster, if not holding down a starting job, but he's stuck in Baltimore. According to GM Mike Elias, he is quote unquote poised to be a huge contributor this year. This year? When this year? Are we talking May? Are we talking September? I don't know, and I'm not sure what that means. And I don't know that I can trust that or Mayo really getting enough at bats. We saw this was so frustrating with guys like Heston Kierstad, Jackson Holiday, etc. last year. Mayo has the power to be one of the top prospects, if not rookie of the year, if he gets the shot. But we're going to have to wait and see, is what I'm afraid of. We won't have to wait long for Will Wagner. The Blue Jays got him at number 15. He came out strong last year with a 3-hit debut and was on fire the first couple of weeks. He did have off-season knee surgery, so this is something that will keep him a little bit limited during the spring, but really he should be fine for the season beginning, and he could hold down a job at, well, multiple positions. I mean, this is someone who can play second base, third base, DH. He might just wind up doing that to keep his bat in there or just kind of move around the diamond. Who knows? But look, if he can continue the streak he was on to start last season, definitely could be somebody who is a very sneaky value.
Next, I might be willing to take a shot on Athletics prospect Colby Thomas. He's shown he's got some power and speed across both double and triple A last year. In a total of 575 plate appearances, he amassed 31 home runs and 15 steals. Now, the steals dropped big time when he moved up to triple A, and to some extent, you have to look at the fact that playing in the Texas League and the Pacific Coast League, very hitter-friendly venues. Okay, I get that, but he's hit all throughout the minors. He's got the tools. This is a prospect who's interesting because he's probably going to be better in fantasy than real life. And we know there's definitely opportunity for him to move up to the bigs because it's the Athletics.
Another potential sneaky value about Luke Keeschall for the Twins. This is another player who can play second base, maybe third base, outfield. He can move around the field, which is beneficial. But the funny thing is he probably won't play any of those positions. He's been limited to DH because of offseason elbow surgery, Tommy John. For a hitter, of course, not that big a deal compared to a pitcher, as Shohei Ohtani showed us. Well, look, Keeschall is a hitter first anyways. He's not a guy who's going to be out there valued highly because of his glove defensive skills. He's versatile, but not necessarily a great defender. But if he can hit, it doesn't matter. Across single A and double A last year, 15 home runs, 23 stolen bases combined. And as spring training gets underway, he was 1 for 2 in the spring debut, but he did play DH. And again, something to look forward to. that might limit his opportunities. But again, the Twins really not super deep on that roster right now. A lot of injury risk all across their lineup, so Keyshawn might find a way to sneak onto the opening day roster. Jacob Melton might find a way to contribute for Houston earlier than expected. Kind of an under the radar prospect, despite being a guy who possesses both power and speed. But Houston, had been a team that didn't have to be too aggressive with calling players up, but now all of a sudden, they're just kind of slowly losing piece by piece. And with Kyle Tucker gone, that leaves a void in the outfield. Is Jose Altuve the answer to fill it? And then they just kind of patch up second base. I feel like Melton has got the goods that he can contribute regularly and become an everyday outfielder for them. And no disrespect intended, but if you look right now, the early projection by Roster Resource, the three outfielders for Houston are at the bottom of that lineup for a reason. Chas McCormick, Ben Gamel, maybe platooning with Brendan Rodgers, who was signed to a minor league deal, and then Jake Myers. I think Melton, a high-end prospect, could definitely force his way into that lineup. All right, number 19. Let's fit a jumbo shrimp in there. A pretty big one, too. Davison De Los Santos, who sounds like he'll be starting AAA Jacksonville to begin the season. The Marlins, have just so many good options. Why would they get their top prospect on the opening day roster? No, but really, it looks like they're going to give Matt Mervis, remember the former Cubs prospect, a shot at first base. Let's see how that goes. Look, maybe he'll earn that job. But either way, Davison De Los Santos, I think, has pretty much proved that he's got nothing left to prove in the minors after leading the minor leagues with 40 home runs last season. This sort of softens the blow from losing, or should I say, giving away Jake Burger for essentially nothing. Like, this could be the next Jake Burger, guy with massive power. Defense, okay, not so much his thing. Maybe he can be the DH, play first base. I don't care. Let's just call him up and see what he can do. I mean, clearly he can mash. At number 20, let's go with Noah Cameron of the Royals. This is a pitcher who I did mention toward the end of last season, as far as beating the breakout guys to stash that could get the call. I thought he might get a little cup of coffee. He didn't. And so he's going to potentially make his debut the first week of 2025 because there is a lot of smoke, and saying that maybe he's going to make that opening day rotation. In the middle of last year, he got moved up to the AAA level and was pretty dominant. 2.32 ERA, 29% strikeout rate in 9 starts. Really, after Cole Reagan's their ace, the Royals rotation right now is pretty much laden with some veteran journeymen. I don't think that they're going to keep Noah Cameron down because they really want to make sure that, Michael Waka or Michael Lorenzen has that spot. And it's also fair to ask, is Drake Baldwin going to get a shot? Is Sean Murphy really holding him down? Not after last year, it didn't look like that. Murphy hit 193 and just struggled big time all season long. He's blaming injuries. It could be that, but look, at this point, why not give the younger Drake Baldwin a shot? He's a guy who definitely has an offensive approach, and he's solid behind the plate, but they could also give him a crack at DH occasionally as well. Between AA and AAA last year, 16 home runs, 88 RBIs, and excellent plate discipline, very low strikeout rate for a guy with that much power. What used to be a strength for Atlanta is now looking like a weakness. Again, Travis d'Arnaud is gone in free agency. Sean Murphy, we'll see if he bounces back, but if not, don't be surprised if Baldwin does get the midseason call-up. At 22, let's go with Nick York, who is now with Pittsburgh. Now, he got shipped from Boston to Pittsburgh last year. He's a second baseman, but there's some talk that maybe they're going to have him work a little bit at first base. Remember, Pittsburgh got Spencer Horwitz in the offseason, but he's recovering from surgery, and they don't really seem to have a very set plan at first base. And talk about maybe Dave Rodriguez, the catcher, working at first base, maybe Nick Triolo, also a second baseman. York is the guy who has the best offensive profile there. Second base should still be held down by Nick Gonzalez, guy who I called a hidden gem recently. And so I would like to see York get that bat into the lineup. I'm not sure if it will happen at first base or if he's just going to be also kind of stuck biding his time behind a honestly mediocre roster. But I do have some hope for him. I think he is ready to produce. We'll just see if it happens in the early part of the season. Now, number 23, Thomas Sagisi for the Cardinals, another player that, well, a lot of us thought maybe would be inheriting at least opportunity, if not the job, at second base. But Nolan Arenado just doesn't seem to have a very feisty trade market these days. The plan was for Arenado to be gone, and then Nolan Gorman moves to third, Sagisi holds down second, and then they have this young infield finally to build around instead of, Goldie and Arenado at the corners. As of right now, that hasn't happened. So again, we might have to be in a holding pattern here. But Sagisi, once he does come up, he can contribute. Last year, he did have a cup of coffee with St. Louis. Only hit 204, one homer, four RBIs in 54 plate appearances. We know he's got the hit tool. We know he's got some pop, and so we're just kind of waiting for that trade to take place. Now, at 24, I'm going to go with a under the radar prospect, Alan Rodin of Toronto Blue Jays. He was recently singled out by name by the Jays GM as somebody who could contribute this year. And why not? He's 25, he's been very productive in the minors, and the Blue Jays also have some moving parts that we aren't quite sure how they're going to settle in the outfield. Right now in center field, Dalton Varsho is also recovering from surgery. He might not be ready to start the season. They're going to have to fill the void somewhere, somehow. It may not be Rodin initially, but this is somebody who at some point will get the chance to play because we don't know exactly what Toronto's going to do if, let's say it's midseason and they're still not contending. Vlad is a free agent. Bo Bichette, heavily rumored to be on the trade market last year. George Springer, not getting any younger. And besides all that, Rodin has just proven that he should get a shot. Last year, in 286 plate appearances at AAA, he hit 314, and he had a total of 16 homers and 14 steals across a total of 530 plate appearances between both Double and AAA. His AAA StatCast numbers are excellent across the board. Not exactly a power bat, so could, use some improvement with the barrels. But other than that, this guy could be a hit machine once he's in Toronto. And at number 25, let's go with Hurston Waldrop for the Braves. Now, if you have any memory of Waldrop getting called up last year, it was not a good memory. In fact, I think it's pretty safe to say that, his time in Atlanta as a major league player went as bad as it possibly could have gone. In just 7 innings pitched, he allowed 13 earned runs. That included 8 walks and 3 home runs. Clearly not ready for prime time just yet, but again, let's give him a second chance. This is a young pitcher who's going to figure things out. And one thing he is doing this offseason is bringing back a curveball that he had ditched. Look, I'm going to give him a couple months to get ready and see if Atlanta is going to give him another crack. I think they will. Look, AJ Smith-Shawver also, you can put him in that same category, but I feel like Waldrop still has the higher ceiling, and there should be an opportunity at some point in that Braves rotation. Those are just some of the prospects that are set to make an impact in fantasy this year. Of course, I'll keep you informed all season long through waiver wire videos, rookie rankings, etc. In the meantime, if you want to know exactly why I'm putting Jason Dominguez as my number 1 prospect for fantasy, well, you can watch that video here.